Welcome to today's Compliance and Audit demo presented by Iceberg Networks. My name is Glenn Gower, and I'll be your moderator today. Regulatory compliance is becoming more complex, and organizations are looking for ways to simplify compliance processes, streamline audit testing and workflows, and use resources more efficiently. Coming up, you'll see how ServiceNow can be used to consolidate regulatory frameworks, manage and automate audit activities, and allow collaboration from multiple stakeholders, building a foundation for an effective integrated risk management program. Now for today's demo, if you have any questions, you can send them to us through the chat panel on your screen. We'll answer as many of them as possible during today's presentation. And everybody always asks, yes, we will be sharing today's deck and a video of the presentation. If you want to get a deeper dive on anything you see today, we would be happy to schedule a follow-up call with you as well. So I want to introduce our presenters, our panelists today. We have David Pearson. He is Iceberg Networks Chief Technology Officer and one of our senior GRC consultants. Welcome, David.
Well, thank you very much, Glenn.
And with him is Travis Giff, a senior GRC architect and developer and part of our ServiceNow team here at Iceberg. Welcome, Travis.
Thank you, Glenn.
Iceberg is 100% focused on governance, risk, and compliance, GRC, and we help organizations plan, deploy, and support risk management software solutions. We've been at this for over 10 years and have helped dozens of organizations across North America. We are a software seller for GRC platforms, including ServiceNow. You'll get a look at that in just a few minutes. And at Iceberg, every project that we work on with our customers and partners is focused on one goal: delivering risk intelligence that's trusted, aggregated, and transparent risk data, enabling organizations to make more informed, confident, and effective business decisions. And to do that, to help organizations achieve that and deliver value from their GRC investments, we offer a full life cycle of services from management workshops to implementation and post-production support. And I want to call out specifically our Risk Intelligence Academy, where you can find more webinars like this one, along with case studies, best practices, and more. You can visit icebergnetworks.com for more information. And with that, David, I'll pass things over to you to set up the demo.
Terrific. Thanks, Glenn. So what we'd like to talk about today is a recent implementation of the ServiceNow GRC functionality, starting with the client that we had on this project. They're a small SaaS company. I say small. At 1,000 employees, it seems kind of large, compared to Iceberg. But in the shadow of Facebook and Twitter and some of the other larger companies, they're a small player. They are, however, growing very rapidly, and they are reasonably well funded, but they need to stretch every dollar to continue to build their brand and market. They have a small audit team with some challenges that we'll get to in a moment, but the small audit team is becoming more important to their business success as they try to achieve some of their audit objectives. So if we look at the challenges they faced, they are currently doing audits against the AICPA Trust Service Principles, also known as SOC 2. And that's stood them in good stead as a cloud provider. They're publishing their audit report. They have an external auditor providing that for them. The internal audit function needs to do their own internal audit on those controls. And so they're following at reasonably low level of maturity, following that typical kind of, email and spreadsheet approach, where they have some, particular challenges around that. That is working for them to a certain extent, except that now they have some requirements to become GDPR compliant. They have a number of clients in the EU space. They also have a number of clients in the US federal government, and they're being asked now for things like FedRAMP compliance and compliance with other kinds of frameworks. So what they're finding is that their spreadsheet-based approach is growing a little bit out of control. Getting a rationalized set of controls based on even just 3 frameworks is very challenging for them. So they're experiencing those kinds of challenges, and then just getting things like the coordination of evidence gathering and attestations between the audit organization and the control owner team is a very big challenge for them. So what they looked at was automating a number of audit functions. The goals for the project were, one, they didn't want to have their control library multiply every time they introduced a new framework. And so so in order to demonstrate that their controls are in place, they didn't want to have to test every clause out of FedRAMP, every clause out of GDPR, and so on. And so they were looking to demonstrate compliance while maintaining a rationalized set of controls. They also wanted to make it easier on their internal organizations, both the audit team and the control owners, so that they could have visibility into the status of attestations, be able to select controls to audit based on attestations actually having been performed. They were suffering problems previously where they might go to do an audit, a control test against the control, only to find that the control was known to be not in place and it had never been attested to. So they were looking to just build much better coordination and simplify the interactions with all of the players. So introduce the ServiceNow solution. And so the particular solution that we have implemented for them is based on the ServiceNow Governance, Risk, and Compliance portfolio of products. We implemented 2 of the 4 modules. First was the Policy and Compliance module, which is a place to capture things like authority documents, all of the policy and control content, and to do basic things like attestation and control implementation description. We also implemented the audit management capability, which is a set of functions around actually conducting audit engagements. And so that's really where the workflow occurs for this. There's a bit of a diagram down at the bottom showing the interaction with something called the UCF, or the Unified Compliance Framework. And this is an external source of controls where it's a rationalized set of controls based on a huge array of authority documents. So if you look at the diagram on the left, this is actually scraped from the Unified Compliance Framework website, and it's showing a fairly large number of objects where this is either content directly from one of those authoritative sources, or is content that they have curated to make it easier to manage the control environment. A number of those objects map directly into ServiceNow content. So there's something in the UCF called authority docs. There's a matching object in ServiceNow called authority documents. Same thing for citations. Those are the direct quotes from the authority documents. And then there's something called controls. And controls are that rationalized set of content where if you had, let's say, 3 authority documents, each with 100 citations, you would end up with 3 times 100 or 300 citations that you're trying to reference. What they've done is they've taken those 300 citations and they've rationalized it down to maybe 75 or 80 controls, where they've deduplicated it and they figured out what the controls ought to be. Those map into ServiceNow in something called policy statements. And policy statements are really intended to provide that interaction between that authority document world and your own internal policy world. So it provided that the content for them to be able to deliver on that multi-regulatory requirement without really stretching how big their spreadsheets needed to become. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Travis to start digging into an actual demo of the solution.
Thank you, David. So before I go into the demo, I'd like to set up the stage here with a few personas that I'm going to be playing throughout the demo. The first one I'm going to play is a compliance manager. And as a compliance manager of the XYZ company, I need to manage my organization's internal policies and ensure my organization is compliant with the various regulatory frameworks. The key activities I'll be performing are managing authority documents, citations, and policy statements, assigning control owners, possibly managing policy acceptance, exceptions, and setting up indicators for continuous monitoring. As well as I will be playing a control owner. And as a control owner of XYZ company, I need to ensure the proper controls are in place by reviewing the control guidance, implementing the control, and by providing sufficient evidence of the control being in place. Some of the key activities I'll perform are completing the control attestations, responding to ad hoc evidence requests, and following up with any issues and remediation tasks. The third persona that I'll be playing is an audit manager. So as an audit manager, I need to manage task assignment to my internal and external audit staff, ensure all controls that are in place are designed and operating effectively, and follow up with issues and remediation tasks for non-compliant controls. So let's dive right into the system as a compliance manager. So I'm logged in as Amy, the compliance manager, and what I want to do is let you have a look at the authority documents that have been imported from the UCF. Here we can see the various authority documents, whether it be NIST, whether it be FedRAMP, SOC 2, and let's take a quick look at what that data looks like behind the scenes here. So we can see the name of the authority document, the number, the source, and some metadata about it regarding its source ID, its version if it had one. And we can see the description here where it tells us that this authority document has 130 citations mapped to 78 UCF common controls. Down here, we can see the list of citations, all the things that we shall do for the authority document. And if we click on the actual reference to the citation, we drill into the citation itself. And then we can see the policy statement itself just by simply clicking here. So what I'd like to do is actually go through one of the policy statements and show you how it's mapped to many citations. So I've got one prepared here for you. Now here, what we can do is we can click on the Citations tab here, and we can see that we have a policy statement to test all software changes before implementation in the production environment. And here we can see that this policy statement maps back to the FedRAMP authority citation as well as the COVID citations. So here, this will actually allow us to reduce the amount of controls needed, reduce the effort on the control owners for implementation and attestations, and reduce the effort on control testing for the auditors. So this is a big win for the compliance manager and all the individuals underneath them. So let's take a quick look at this policy statement and speak about some of the items that we see in these related lists here. So we have profile types. So what a profile type is, it allows us to define a certain type and specify policy statements associated to it. So any item that's added to this profile type, as in this example, we have a profile type of company applications, and we have a profile of time reporting application. So we can say that we need these controls associated with this profile type, and every time we get a new profile, whether it be a time reporting application or a business application added to here, what it's going to do for us is it's going to go in and create an instance of those controls. So it actually saves us a lot of time and effort for manually creating those records. It will also assign the control owner, and here we've got an example of Joe Control Owner, and it saves a lot of data administration on the compliance manager. So let's take a quick navigation back to the policy statement and look at a few other ones. So we have the ability to create and manage policies within our organization, so we don't always have to get all the policies and that from the UCF. We can create our own and manage the life cycle within ServiceNow as well. Here we can see an instance of the control associated with this policy statement, any test templates that we've defined. So in this record, we specifically don't have any, so let me take a look at a record that we do have. So here we've got a policy statement that says manage changes, and we have a test template that says validate the change management policy exists. So the test templates will allow us to test controls in the same fashion over and over and over again. So if we have a test suite that says we need these 3 procedures in order to test this control, we can leverage that every time a new control is created. We also have the ability to create indicator templates. And this is a handy feature within ServiceNow. What this will allow us to do is, for example, if we're using ServiceNow to do change management, we can actually go through automatically and collect that evidence to determine whether or not changes are implemented with a backout plan or not. So maybe we have a control that says you need a backout plan before you go to implement any changes. Well, we don't have to assign that collection to anybody within the compliance team to go out and gather that stuff, or the control owner. We can automatically go out and grab that data and determine whether or not the control is compliant or not without having to interact with anybody else. It's just automated collection. We can manage policy exceptions, and we can track issues associated with the controls or policy statements. The platform also offers the ability for an overview dashboard that can be helpful in reporting compliance to the board or executives regarding where the organization is compliant to the many regulatory frameworks. Let's check that out. So here we can see the compliance requirements, and let's just pick one here. So we've got FedRAMP. If we click that, it will act as an interactive filter, allowing us to drive down and see the data that makes up the overall compliance. So we can see we have 4 controls that are empty right now that haven't been attested to or are not marked compliant. We can see the compliance by authority document. We can see any score trending for the various authority documents, and where we are in compliance to the number of controls. So let's take a quick look at one of the controls here. So I have this control. It's been automatically created through the profile type and profile relationship. It's related to the managed change policy statement on my time reporting application. I've assigned an owner, Joe Control Owner, and it tells me a little bit more about the control, whether the enforcement was mandated, the category was operational management, and the classification is preventative or detective or etc. Here I can also specify the control frequency on how often I want to check this control is in place or put the control in place. Can provide any additional information around the control down here, and as well I can indicate whether it's a key control or maybe just a supplementary control. So what I'd like to do now is show you the attestation capabilities within the platform. So previously the client we were engaging with was doing all their attestations in spreadsheets, and it was hard to really track them in a centralized location when you're using Excel. So I'll show you what that looks like in ServiceNow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bump this control to the attest phase, and it's going to send out a notification to the control owner that an attestation has been created.
So I think you're switching over to the control owner view at this point? Yeah, so just in terms of how ServiceNow can help somebody like the compliance manager, we saw that it can hold things like the content from the UCF, which enables us to produce a very rationalized set of controls without having to do a ton of analysis on it. You also get away from having to create individual spreadsheets for each of the control owners, where there might be, a control owner owns 5 to 10 controls, and you're having to move rows in a spreadsheet around from one spreadsheet to another. Now, instead of having that spreadsheet nightmare, you have a database where you can look at the controls and individually manage the ownership in that system, and be able to keep the relationships between the controls, the follow-up actions, like if there's remediation activities or other control tests and that sort of thing.
Thank you, David. So I'm going to impersonate the control owner, which is another powerful feature with ServiceNow. It allows us to test as many different personas without having to log in and log out. So right now I'm going to be Joe Control Owner. And Joe Control Owner, we've built this nice handy-dandy dashboard for him that gives him all his controls by state, all his controls by compliance status, all his controls, and any attestations. So that's where we wanted to go right now, was the attestation. So let me show you what the user experience is for Joe Control Owner. He'll just simply click this Take Attestation. It'll take a few seconds, And we'll see the attestation here. Now, this is an out-of-the-box attestation that's provided with the solution for policy and compliance. So there's not a lot really to see in this example. We've got a few questions that ask, is the control implemented? A drop-down with a few available options, such as not applicable, yes, no. Let's pick yes. Once we pick yes, it loads a corresponding question to attach the evidence of this control. So let's go and find some evidence. Attach that and explain anything here. So we'll just say that the evidence is attached. Now, we also have the ability to save this attestation instead of submitting it. So for example, if you decided to develop your own attestation, which ServiceNow does perform does give you an attestation designer, so you can do so, you can simply just save the progress and come back later to enter more content on your attestation. But in this example, since it was just a simple attestation, we can come back in, take our attestation, and submit it. So the attestation capabilities, also, we can define a correct response for a specific question to determine whether or not the control is compliant or not. Additionally, we can have automatic creation of issues for follow-up when the control is marked non-compliant, reducing the effort and data management for the compliance manager. So that's really all I wanted to show around the control owner's perspective. But I did want to just quickly glance over the dashboard that we had put together for them. So we can talk about some of the records they had, which were audit tasks, issues, and remediation tasks. So what this gave the control owner was a central location for them to view all their items that they needed to perform, whether it be a compliance activity or an audit activity. They've got this centralized dashboard so they could just come in and know what they have to do in their queue.
So if you think about the problem of emailing out a spreadsheet to somebody saying, can you please do these 3 things? And then you realize you left the 4th thing off the spreadsheet. So you send them another email with a second spreadsheet saying, please ignore that first spreadsheet. You need to look at this one instead. And then the version control nightmare that happens as you try to fly them back and forth between the compliance people, the auditors, and the control owners. It works fine with a handful of people, but as you grow, becomes very unmanageable. So I think we're seeing that from a control owner perspective, they have a very easy view of what's being asked of them by the audit organization.
Thank you, David. So the third and final persona that I'm going to be playing is the audit manager. So let's impersonate them. So as an audit manager, I mentioned before that I need the capability to create consistent test templates for the controls that I need to test. So I can come into the system and go to test templates and specify a test template to a certain policy statement. So for example, I have this policy statement that says I need to manage changes. A description that says validate the change management policy exists. A duration that says we should take about 10 days to complete this test. We have some design expectations on how we expect the design to be tested, and procedures on how we want to test the design, as well as we have how we want this control to operate and how we want to test that the control is operating effectively. Now, what's going to happen is for every instance of this policy statement, or for every control instance, we can create a test plan to be consistent and across the board with every control instance that we want to test. So this also saves us some data administration when performing the audits. Now let's take a quick look at an engagement. So what I've done here is I've prepared an engagement, but I'll explain a little bit about what I've put together. So here I've named the engagement my Q2 audit, and I've assigned it to Jen, the audit manager. I've specified an audit period start and an audit period end. So this is the period that I'm auditing, not really when I'm going to start the audit or finish it, just what period I'm auditing. A description is audit for Q2, and some of the objectives that I'm going to perform are control testing, evidence requests, issue and remediation follow-up. Up here, you'll see it's got a nice process flow life cycle, which goes from scoping, validation, fieldwork, approval, follow-up, and finally closed. We can track the percentage complete by all the associated tasks and where they are within the audit engagement, as well as we can manage our internal and external auditors on our audit engagement team. So it's just as simple as coming in, unlocking our auditors, looking for some new auditors and adding them here from this simple list here. Or we can add a group of individuals by simply coming in, selecting a bunch of them, and moving them over here. So once we have all our internal auditors who are going to help do the control testing, maybe any walkthroughs or interviews, we just lock that field down, and we can specify approvers. So in this circumstance, we have someone who can come in, look at all the results from the engagement, and approve it. Down here, we've got a bunch of related lists. So what we've done in the scoping phase is we've added the profiles that we want to include in this audit. So I know there's one application out there that I created, which is my time reporting application, and I want to audit that for Q2. I want to make sure the proper controls are in place. So what I've done is I've simply just clicked this button here, add, and selected the profiles that were in scope. And once I've done that, I've bumped it to the validate phase. So there was just a button up here that allowed me to click validate, and it moved the process indicator right to the validate phase. Now at this phase, it's also saved me a lot of work, because if I was to set this record up, I'd have to go through and add all my controls, add all my test plans, any indicator results. So there's a lot of data maintenance around that initial record setup. Well, the great thing about ServiceNow is it sets that up all for me. I simply just add my profiles. It's going to populate all my controls, all the test plans that I've created, and any indicator results that we may have set up previously from the indicators as the compliance manager. So what I also want to show here is how easy it is within the tool to manage audit tasks. So here I've got 3 audit tasks. I've got a control test that I need to perform in my audit. I've got an interview I need to perform, and a walkthrough I need to perform here. So if I wanted to assign this, I could simply go in this way and click the number. I could assign the representative here who's a part of my team, or myself if I wanted to. Or there's another option of assignment where I can come down and I can double click here and assign someone here. Or there's another way where I can bulk assign and just select a bunch of them and assign them all to one individual. So there's many options on assignment for tasks. But there's another powerful feature that I'd like to show you called the visual task board. So what I've done is just whipped up a quick visual task board of all my audit tasks. And let me show you that. So here's another user experience that allows you to see all your tasks by state. So you can see the various lanes. I've got ones that are open, ones that are work in progress, ones that are in review, close, etc. All the people who are working on all these tasks. So maybe if I only wanted the ones that are associated to Jen, I could select Jen and it brings Jen's up, or maybe Paul and Rena. I also have the capability to filter here. Maybe I just want to find anything that's a control test, and it filters up there as well. I also have the ability here to assign tasks to individuals. So I can find that one that's not assigned here. Oh, there's an evidence request that's unassigned. I can take this person, drag them here, and assign them as the primary person who's going to be working on this, or I can drag it down to an additional assignee. Just as simple as that. And if I wanted to move these to a various state after they've been assigned, I can move them over to the work in progress, and then to the review stage, and everything's all being set in the background, all the states and status. I also have the ability here to chat with my team and track any activity on any of the records that have been adjusted recently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate back to the audit engagement. And I'm going to show you an item, a control test. So let's go into this control test, and I'm just going to assign this to Jen, the audit manager. She's going to work on this one. Now Jen's going to look at this control test, and she's going to see the descriptions or guidance on how to test the design of this control and what are the procedures. She has the ability to determine whether or not the control is effective or ineffective. So maybe she says that the design is effective. Down here, she can put in her result and proceed with the operation test. So she looks at the test of operations. She sees that, oh, I need a bit more evidence here. So we had decided that we wanted to put in a feature for the client in order for them to create ad hoc evidence requests. So we've saved them a lot of time about going through and preparing an email and saying, you know, Joe, control owner, I need this evidence, and can you please give me this information? So what we've done is we've actually built something within ServiceNow that will allow us to create ad hoc evidence requests. So what we do is we come down to the audit task related list, we select the control test that requires more evidence, hit the button to generate evidence requests, and at the top of the screen it'll just let us know that evidence requests have been generated. So the great thing about this is we can select as many control tests as we want in this list and bulk generate the evidence requests. And what's going to happen is it's automatically going to go out and send the assigned to representative a notification that evidence is required. And they need to produce the evidence as mentioned within the control test template. They're looking for maybe just screenshots of some security parameters, for example. And they can give us that evidence and send it back to the control tester for review. I just want to talk about a few other methods of communication within the platform as well. So maybe, for example, I'm back in the control test and I wanted to put some work notes in here. So the work notes is a powerful place to put notes because anybody who has access to that record can read those work notes. So here I'm just going to say that, you know, evidence was requested from the control. So that this way, people within my internal audit group can view the comments and where I am with the actual work notes. There's also another feature in ServiceNow that's known as the Connect Chat. So, for example, I don't want to send out another notification to Joe, control owner, to get me the evidence that I've already sent him an evidence request for. But instead of going into a third-party tool and having to open Messenger or Facebook or Skype for Business, I can simply just come in here, send a message to Joe, and say, did you review that policy with the team yet? And then Joe could log in and he would see through his chat messenger, I'll show you that quickly. He'd get a little icon up here. And he can click this. And he can simply respond to Jen saying he is on it. So what I'd like to do now is just go back as Jen, the audit manager, and talk about a few more features that the platform does offer for the audit and compliance. So once I've completed the entire engagement, I also have the ability to publish a report to a knowledge base. Now, what this will allow me to do is create a report that I can grant external auditors access to come in and view any issues and remediation tasks that were associated with this audit engagement of Q2. This way, I don't have to give them access to any of the tables. They can just come in and see the report output. So I can simply come in, provide the knowledge base, which is audit, report template, and generate the article. Another thing that we can actually do here is review some of the out-of-the-box reports, such as the audit engagement timeline view, So here we can see the various engagements over time, where they are within their progress. So we can see we've got one here that's 81% complete, got another one here that's 100% complete, ones that are upcoming, as well as we can filter these by specific dates too. If we wanted to find out any additional information on these audit engagements, we can simply just click one of these timelines here, and it'll come up with all the related items, as in any audit tasks, control test issues, or other issues. One of the things we also added to the audit management solution was a GRC team dashboard. So let me show you that. So here, we've given the audit manager a view of every record within the ServiceNow GRC or audit management solution, a nice view that's all consolidated. So they could have went in and they could have navigated through all these different modules within the left-hand side, but we gave them one centralized view to view all their engagements, any of their issues, overdue issues, remediation tasks, any reviews or approvals, controls and attestations, and where are they in overall compliance. So this concludes my demo today. I'd like to send this over back to David to wrap things up.
Yeah, so as we saw for the audit manager or third line of defense, that they now have the tools to coordinate the activities of their own audit team and of the control owners. They have visibility into all of the various objects, the attestations, evidence requests, control tests, remediation activities. So looking at the outcomes, so they were able to consolidate their regulatory requirements into something fairly manageable. They were able to automate the key processes of control assignment, attestation, and the audit itself, control testing. They were able to actually now, coordinate the activities between the control owners and both internal and external audit. And they have visibility into all of these activities through a sequence of dashboards and reports and so on. So if you look at the project on implementation, this was approximately an 8-week implementation. Have to drive the fact that there was really very little configuration that we did. We did do some configuration to help with the automation of evidence collection, and we compiled some reports and so on. But a lot of the activity is really mapping their business user types to the out-of-the-box roles and workflows and so on. We also help them data fill the client organization, data fill the control content, and to analyze their profiles and profile types so that they would get automatic assignment of controls to the appropriate systems for their control owners to audit. So it was interesting to note that this was a greenfield ServiceNow implementation. So it demonstrates that implementing GRC first is very practical to do on this platform. I think ServiceNow has very strong capabilities in the IT operations world, but the GRC package is definitely leading edge. So if we look at where they're headed, they've started with GRC, but they did need to populate a little bit of information into a configuration management database. And so they're now seeing that the CMDB functionality is leading edge, and so they're looking at other IT operations functions in ServiceNow as potential next steps. From the audit world, it's a very easy lift to get into risk management. So they're seeing that as a likely place to take the GRC functionality. They're also, I think, just going to continue to expand things like the suite of compliance requirements that they meet, as they're seeing that as a bit of a competitive advantage where gets them into different markets. So just in terms of wrap up, the the whole thing is starting to fall under the umbrella of integrated risk management. This is, I think, the evolution of GRC. And we're seeing that being able to produce trusted, transparent, aggregated view of risk touches a large number of business functions. And as a leader in the integrated risk management space, ServiceNow supports a lot of these functions. We saw that there's a tie together between operational processes such as change management and being able to identify control implementation and potential risk situations by having all of those objects tied together into a common platform. So being able to share information across the use cases is a very important part of being able to have visibility into risk. And it helps you bake risk management into the things you do on a day-to-day basis. So I think I'd like to turn it over to Glenn. I think we have a few minutes for Q&A.
Yep, and thanks, David. Thanks, Travis. And we do have a few questions coming in. A couple, we touched, or you touched a little bit on external audit. And I think a couple of people watching looking for a little bit more explanation or information of how that interfaces. One person just asked in general if audit management can handle an external audit, or is it more suited to internal audits? And then another related question was, how are controls displayed or presented to an external auditor and then reset for next year? So, I mean, those are maybe a little more specific, but David, maybe if you could just give an overview a bit of how external audit integrated into this particular project.
Yeah, it's a good question. So external audit, we didn't actually show how their role interacts, but they have a role that gives them very constrained permissions in the solution. So, for example, an internal auditor can view all of the audit engagements and a huge range of the controls and control tests and so on. The external auditor can be given an account, and with the external audit permission, they're given visibility only to audit engagements where they are named. So that then gives them the ability to view also the related objects, such as the controls and control tests, but only those associated with the engagement. It also limits the control, things like the attestation and control test information to in-period things, so that you don't see necessarily the results of an attestation from 5 years ago. You're really only seeing what is current information. So the external auditor, they give visibility to all of the appropriate objects for them to see, but restricted to things that are in scope for their particular audit.
Okay, thanks, David. This one might be more for Travis. Someone's asking, what's the difference? I think this was on the compliance manager view. What's the difference between the control frequency and the profile compliance attestation frequency?
So maybe, actually, Glenn, I'll take that one. So the control frequency is the frequency of operation of the control. So if you look at things like, I think we had change management as labeled monthly, that might be inappropriate because a lot of the time change management is done on an as-needed basis. But some controls are executed on a periodic basis, like control to check for accounts belonging to people that might have left the organization. That's the sort of thing where the control frequency would be, perhaps quarterly. And the attestation frequency is the frequency that you're asking the control owner to attest that the control is in place. So if I have that control about check for expired or accounts that should be expired and aren't, you do that, say, on a monthly basis, and then annually you ask the control owner, are you doing this on a monthly basis? And that's the attestation.
Okay. And another question specific to some of the screens that we saw in the demo. Within the test template, is there a place that shows the test results, like a pass or a fail?
Not in the test template. The test template is really what it sounds like. It's a template. So the actual test itself, I don't know if you want to navigate into ServiceNow. So the control tests get related to test plans that emanate from the test template. So they're all tied together, but the actual test result is at the control test record.
So here we can specify, the effectiveness. So based on the effectiveness of the design or based on the effectiveness of the operation, it will drive the overall control effectiveness itself with the control test.
I actually don't know the answer to this. Does the test template have a roll-up calculation that shows the results of all related control tests? Many of the objects in ServiceNow do. So things like the policy statements, the citations, they roll up results from all of the related objects underneath. You want to go explore?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, okay. We'll get back to you on that one.
Yeah. A question about updating regulatory content or configuring regulatory content. How easy is it to add or update the content in the tool?
Well, certainly super easy from the UCF. You log into the UCF portal and indicate which regulatory frameworks you want to address. And ServiceNow has a automated pull of that information from the UCF. If you're doing this manually, don't have a subscription to the UCF, then it's very easy to add content through things like spreadsheet imports. It's got a very strong capability to import all of those citation records from a fairly easy to construct Excel spreadsheet.
Okay. Well, I'll ask a question, David. For companies that are interested in getting started on this, thinking they might need to move from spreadsheets to a GRC software tool like ServiceNow, where would you recommend they start? What's a good place to get going?
Oh, well, I mean, certainly the compliance management solution in ServiceNow is a fantastic place just to take the content that you have and consolidate it into one place. So even if all you want to do is manage that information, that's a very good place to get started. So it ties your authoritative source information with policies, and if you have internal controls that you're trying to audit, assuming you have those created and they're in spreadsheets somewhere. So the compliance module is where all of those data objects are, and so it's a place to get started. You can start to do things like assign control owners without having a ton of other information there, and then start to automate the attestation process. That's all just part of that control management life cycle. And then from there, if you layer the audit functionality over top, that gives you things like the audit engagements, but now you need to have things like your control tests understood. And so that's normally a next level of maturity kind of content. It's not so much functionality in ServiceNow as it is just analysis that you need to perform about how to test your controls. And then you can keep expanding from there to start to touch on things like risk. So you have controls to address risks. Now you want to be able to potentially report on the current risk posture.
Okay, thanks, David. We've actually exhausted all the questions that have come in, a few good ones there. And we're coming up at the end of our time period. So I'd like to say thanks again to David and Travis for joining us today, and to everyone who tuned in to listen to the discussion. If you do want a deeper dive on the demo or anything you've seen presented here today, please get in touch with us. You can email info@icebergnetworks.com or visit our website for more information. Now, later this afternoon, we will email you a link to the deck and the video on demand. And if you enjoyed today's presentation, by all means, please share the link with your colleagues inside or outside of your organization who may be going through the same journey and challenges that you are. So thanks for tuning in and joining us, and I hope everyone has a great afternoon.